In our last episode, we saw how the Iranian Revolution upended the Middle East, turning Iran into a defiant rival of the West and sparking rivalries that still shape the region. That wave of change shook every capital in the Arab world, but just across Iran's western border, another storm was waiting to erupt. Iraq, under Saddam Hussein, was fragile, sanctioned, and deeply isolated, yet still held together by the grip of a dictator who refused to bow to outside pressure. Then came September 11th, and suddenly Washington's gaze locked onto Baghdad. The Bush administration claimed Saddam had weapons of mass destruction, weapons that could destroy cities in moments. The world was told Iraq was too dangerous to be left alone. And in 2003, the United States launched a full-scale invasion. What followed wasn't just the fall of Saddam, it was the unraveling of Iraq, the birth of new insurgencies, and the start of a conflict that would scar the Middle East for generations. In March 2003, the United States and its allies rolled into Iraq with a display of military power the world had not seen since the Gulf War. American officials promised a swift campaign, shock and awe, that would topple Saddam Hussein and free Iraqis from dictatorship. And in the first few weeks, it looked like they had succeeded. Baghdad fell. Saddam's palaces were stormed. His regime, which had gripped the country for decades, collapsed almost overnight. For Washington, this was victory. But victory on paper didn't mean stability on the ground. The real disaster came with decisions made after the invasion. The US-led Coalition Provisional Authority dismantled the entire Iraqi army and purged thousands of officials tied to the Ba'ath Party. Overnight, a nation was stripped of its governing class and security forces. Millions were left unemployed, humiliated, and bitter. Looting spread across Baghdad. Ministries were gutted, infrastructure crumbled. What was left wasn't freedom, but chaos. For ordinary Iraqis, daily life became unbearable. With no police, armed gangs roamed freely. With no functioning government, corruption flourished. And with no security, kidnappings, robberies, and violence became the new normal. The fall of Saddam didn't feel like liberation. It felt like the collapse of an entire country. That chaos quickly became fertile ground for rebellion. Across Iraq, insurgent groups formed, striking both foreign troops and civilians. Car bombs exploded in crowded markets. US convoys were ambushed in narrow streets. For many Iraqis, the occupation became just another form of oppression. Out of this instability rose Abu Musab al-Zarqawi, a name that would soon terrify the world. A Jordanian militant, Zarqawi founded al-Qaeda in Iraq, a group that blended local grievances with global jihadist ideology. His strategy was brutal. Sectarian bombings, executions, and suicide attacks designed to pit Sunni against Shia, neighbor against neighbor. He wasn't just fighting the Americans. He was tearing at the very fabric of Iraqi society. Zarqawi's campaign marked a turning point. Iraq stopped being simply a battleground between an occupier and resistance fighters. It became a sectarian bloodbath. Entire neighborhoods were divided by sect, and militias began controlling checkpoints and streets. Iraq was no longer just occupied, it was unraveling from within. Even after Zarqawi's death in 2006, the seeds he planted did not die with him. His network reorganized, recruiting disenfranchised Iraqis and foreign fighters alike. Under new leadership, the group began calling itself the Islamic State of Iraq, laying the foundation for an even deadlier movement that would soon reach across borders. But the legacy of Iraq's war didn't stop at its borders. Fighters who had cut their teeth in Iraq carried their battle into new front lines. One of them was Abu Muhammad al-Jolani, a young commander who once fought under Zarqawi's umbrella. Jolani broke away and eventually founded Jabhat al-Nusra, an al-Qaeda affiliate that became a major force in Syria's civil war. When Syria erupted in 2011, Jolani's group took the tactics perfected in Iraq, suicide bombings, urban warfare, propaganda, and applied them in Syria's cities. What started in Baghdad's rubble now consumed Aleppo and Damascus. And as Jabhat al-Nusra fought for influence, another faction split off, the Islamic State in Iraq and Syria, or ISIS, which declared its so-called caliphate in 2014. The Iraq invasion had unleashed a chain reaction. By toppling Saddam without a plan for what came next, the US had destabilized not only Iraq, but also its neighbors. What began as a war in Baghdad spilled over into Damascus, and soon the entire Middle East was caught in flames ignited by decisions made in 2003. Jolani, forged in the fire of Iraq, branched off into Syria, answering the call of Sunnis oppressed under Assad's regime. His rise proved that extremism was no longer confined by borders. It was a regional wildfire, carried by ideology, weapons, and disillusioned fighters moving from one battlefield to the next. 2 decades later, the Iraq War's legacy is written in ruins and memories. More than 200,000 Iraqis lost their lives. Millions were displaced, creating one of the largest refugee crises of modern history. Entire cities like Mosul and Fallujah were reduced to rubble after years of battles between insurgents, US troops, and later ISIS fighters. The social fabric of Iraq, already fragile, was ripped apart by sectarian violence. Sunnis and Shias lived in fear of each other, their trust shattered by years of bloodshed. The war also redrew global politics. America's image in the Middle East was permanently stained. For many, the invasion proved that Washington was willing to destroy a nation on the basis of lies. The promised weapons of mass destruction were never found. The justifications collapsed, but the damage remained. The instability unleashed by Iraq spread into Syria, fueled extremism in Yemen and Libya, and even triggered a refugee wave that reached the heart of Europe. The Iraq War also changed how the world viewed Western intervention. No longer was it seen as a path to democracy or freedom. Instead, it became a cautionary tale of arrogance, deception, and failure. For Iraqis, the war wasn't just history. It was an everyday reality, etched into their lives through poverty, broken families, and a nation still struggling to recover. And so we arrive at the question that has haunted the world ever since. Was it worth it? Was the removal of Saddam Hussein, a brutal dictator, worth the cost of hundreds of thousands of lives, shattered societies, and decades of instability? For Iraqis who lost their homes, for families who lost their loved ones, and for a region still reeling from the aftershocks, the answer feels painfully clear. The war was not just a miscalculation, it was a turning point that unleashed chaos far beyond Iraq's borders. And yet, some still argue that Iraq is better without Saddam, that a dictator's fall justified the cost. But the reality speaks louder. The Iraq War was a conflict launched on deception, executed without foresight, and remembered not for liberation, but for destruction. It left behind a region fractured, a superpower distrusted, and a question that will never truly go away. This is Fault Lines, the Middle East Unraveled.